Become the kind of man who doesn't give a fuck. That's right, the kind of man who doesn't give a fuck. Now, some of you probably heard the profanity and missed the point. So let me say it again. Become the kind of man who doesn't give a fuck. Not fake tough, not dramatic, not reckless, just free. Now, take Bill, for example. This is Bill. Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill woke up this morning at 6:15 a.m. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and Bill's wife had left him for another man. Now, most men would be devastated. Some men would collapse right there in the hallway. Some men would begin composing a 9-page text message with no paragraph breaks. Some men would put on sad music and stare at the wall like the wall had answers, but not Bill. Bill looked at the note. Bill blinked twice. Bill said, well, that's unfortunate. Then Bill made eggs because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Now, to be clear, Bill isn't heartless. Bill isn't dead inside. Bill will process this later. Probably on a walk, possibly near a tree. Maybe with one hand on his hip like a man considering several things at once, but right now Bill has work at 8 o'clock, and the eggs are on the pan. So Bill continues because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Not surface level doesn't give a fuck. Not bumper sticker doesn't give a fuck. Not I'm fine while his eye is twitching doesn't give a fuck. Bill doesn't give a fuck down in the wiring. Bill doesn't give a fuck where the little hooks usually catch. Bill doesn't give a fuck on a molecular level. Bill gets stressed. His belt loop catches on the drawer handle. A lesser man would take this personally. A lesser man would begin a lifelong feud with furniture. But Bill knows the drawer isn't his enemy. The drawer is an empty drawer. Bill unhooks himself. He continues because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill walks outside. It's raining. He didn't check the weather. That's on Bill. Bill respects the evidence. Bill says, good, now we know. Bill gets a jacket. Bill continues because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill gets in the car. The gas light is on. Did Bill know yesterday that he was low on gas? Yes. Did Bill tell himself, I'll get in the morning? Also yes. Was that wise? Clearly not. But Bill doesn't spiral into shame. Bill doesn't become a victim of petroleum logistics. Bill drives to the gas station because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Now, at the gas station, the pump says, see cashier. Ah, a classic test. Many good men have been spiritually broken by the phrase, see cashier, but not Bill. Bill sees the cashier because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Inside, the cashier is moving slowly, historically slowly, like he's being paid by the century. There's a man ahead of Bill buying lottery tickets one number at a time from memory while also arguing about scratchers. The line isn't moving. Bill breathes through his nose. Bill studies a bag of beef jerky priced like medicine. Bill waits because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Finally, Bill pays. The pump works. The receipt doesn't print. The machine asks Bill if he wants a receipt, then refuses to provide one. This is deception. This is betrayal. But Bill doesn't become possessed by gas station equipment. Bill says, okay. Bill leaves because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Now Bill is late for work. Traffic jam. Cars as far as the eye can see. Brake lights glowing like little red reminders that nobody is special today. Most men would grip the steering wheel and begin negotiating with God. Bill doesn't negotiate with traffic. Traffic doesn't care. Traffic has never cared. Traffic is traffic. Bill turns on the radio. Static. Commercial. Another commercial. Bill turns the radio off. Bill sits in silence because Bill doesn't give a fuck. A man cuts Bill off. Hard, aggressive, unnecessary. The kind of lane change that says, I have unresolved issues in a financed vehicle. Bill sees it. Bill allows it. Bill says, there he goes, because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill arrives at work 12 minutes late. His boss is waiting. Bill, the boss says, you're late. Bill nods. This is true. Bill is late. Bill doesn't explain the gas pump, the lottery ticket historian, the receipt betrayal, the traffic jam, the static, the commercials, or the man with the financed vehicle. Bill says, you're right. I'll tighten that up. Then Bill goes to work because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Now, watch closely. Bill cares about being dependable. Bill cares about his record. Bill cares about correcting what needs correction. That's why Bill doesn't waste 20 minutes defending 12 minutes. Bill simply corrects because Bill doesn't give a fuck. At 10:30, Bill opens his lunch. Bill packed chicken and rice. Solid lunch, Bill. Responsible meal. You see? You see? Bill is trying. Bill has structure. Bill has protein. Bill has rice. Bill has a little container with a lid that never quite snaps on right. This is a man attempting civilization, but someone in the break room says, that looks dry. A weaker man would defend the chicken. A weaker man would explain the macros. A weaker man would say, actually, it's seasoned. At lunch, Bill checks his phone. There's a message from his wife. It says, we need to talk. Bill agrees. They probably do. But Bill is at work. Bill doesn't start the emotional trial on company time. Bill doesn't type, delete, retype, and then send something that begins with, honestly, I think it's funny how. No. Bill puts the phone down. Bill finishes the dry chicken because Bill doesn't give a fuck. After work, Bill goes to the grocery store. Bill needs eggs, milk, rice, coffee, and one of those rotisserie chickens that always look like they've seen combat. Total is $19.43. Bill has a $20 bill. The cashier says, I don't have change for a 20. Now, that is fascinating. A lesser man would begin an economic lecture. A lesser man would say, how does a grocery store not have change? A lesser man would make the moment larger than it needs to be, but not Bill. Bill removes the copy. The total is now $14.91. Bill uses his card. Bill continues because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Outside, the grocery bag rips. Of course it does. The eggs fall. 2 survive, 10 don't. A tragedy in cardboard. Bill looks down. Bill says, we lost some good men today. Then Bill picks up what he can because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill gets home. The neighbor's dog is barking. Again, same dog, same window, same message. Nobody knows what the dog wants. Maybe the dog doesn't know what the dog wants, but the dog has committed to the announcement. Bill respects commitment. Bill puts on headphones because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill walks into the bathroom. Someone has been there before him. Someone has done violence to the air. It may be a family member. It may have been a guest. It may have been something spiritual. Bill doesn't investigate. Bill opens a window. Bill lights a candle, and Bill exits the room with dignity because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill sits down at his desk. The internet goes out. This is the modern ambush. Men used to be attacked by wolves. Now Wi-Fi drops during login. Bill looks at the router. The router blinks with no remorse. Bill unplugs it. Bill counts to 10. Bill plugs it back in because Bill doesn't give a fuck. The printer refuses to print. The printer has one job. The printer won't do it. Bill doesn't scream at the printer. Bill doesn't threaten the printer. Bill doesn't ask the printer why it is like this. Bill opens the paper tray. There's no paper. Good. Now we know. Bill adds paper because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Evening comes. Bill goes for a walk. This is where Bill lets the day catch up. The wife thing hurts. Of course it hurts. The man is calm, not made of plywood. But Bill knows something. A feeling can be real without becoming the commander. So Bill lets it be real. Bill doesn't hand it the wheel because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Bill gets back home. He cleans the kitchen. His life isn't perfect, clearly. He cleans the kitchen because the kitchen is there. And the dishes are there. And his hands are there. So Bill does the next correct thing because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Now, let us review. Bill lost his wife. Bill fought the drawer. Bill got rained on. Bill needed gas. Bill saw cashier. Bill endured lottery ticket purgatory. Bill lost his receipt. Bill sat in traffic. Bill got cut off. Bill was late. Bill was corrected. Bill ate dry chicken under criticism. Bill received the dangerous text. Bill lost coffee privileges. Bill buried 10 eggs. Bill survived the dog. Bill survived the bathroom. Bill survived the Wi-Fi. Bill survived the printer. And yet, gentlemen, Bill remains. Why? Because Bill doesn't give a fuck. Now, let me say it clean. Bill does care. Bill cares about what is his. Bill cares about correction. Bill cares about his record. Bill cares about not making one bad day everybody else's emergency. Bill cares about keeping his hands on the wheel. That's why Bill doesn't give a fuck about the wrong things. The drawer doesn't own Bill. The gas pump doesn't own Bill. Traffic doesn't own Bill. The boss's tone doesn't own Bill. Dry chicken commentary doesn't own Bill. The dog, the bathroom, the printer, even grief doesn't get to own Bill. It can visit, it can speak, it can hurt, but it doesn't govern. That's the lesson. Become like Bill. Not emotionless, not careless, not checked out. Free. Free enough to be annoyed and still continue. Free enough to be hurt and still clean the kitchen. Free enough to be corrected without turning it into a courtroom. Free enough to let the dog bark. Free enough to let the eggs die with honor. Free enough to come back tomorrow. Become the kind of man who doesn't give a fuck. Then become the kind of man who doesn't give a fuck when the day gets loud. Then become the kind of man who doesn't give a fuck when the old hooks reach for you. Then become the kind of man who doesn't give a fuck on a molecular level. Down in the wiring. Down where the reflex used to be. Down where the old version of you used to grab the wheel. That's the move.